The level of our friendship is 3 bullet points.
No, exactly.
It's not 5, and you've gone to 5, and I was okay until I hit number 4.
Right.
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories.
Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jody.
I'm Elliot.
And we are recording in our brand new SHMS Global Studio, whatever, HQ.
Yes, we are. Studio 8H.
Pictures to follow. It's actually really cool. I'm
Yeah,
very excited. We are now set up to not just do audio, but also some video.
Yep.
And so stay tuned. That stuff will be posted soon. And before we hop into the story, just a quick reminder, if you text the word story to 345-345, you can get all the links to all the things.
All right.
Take it away. Yep.
So here's my story. As with you, I'm sure, I get a lot of people who will come up to me and they'll ask me, hey, I have a quick question for you about, and they'll ask me a business question or anything having to do with the law. Too many ask me about divorce, and I'm in custody. So I'm happy to be able to say not my
Not
area.
my thing.
But I do get a lot of these questions about business.
Yeah, I mean, it's how I built my entire, it's just being very free with my knowledge and thoughts and whatever I have to offer.
And I really believe in that, to be free with your knowledge and thoughts. And
whether they want them or not.
Right. But at the same time, there's a boundary. And each person has to sense where the boundary is. So let me give you an example. This is why I brought it up. Okay. And I'm going to read from an email.
Random musing.
Right. Just random musing. So I met this person a number of times through various networking events and trade events and whatnot.
So not a total stranger.
Not a total stranger. No, we're friendly, meaning we haven't seen each other outside of those happenstance run-ins. We haven't planned to get together for coffee, but it wouldn't be unusual if we did. It wouldn't be out of the ordinary. And anyway, so she sent me an email. I hadn't heard from her in several months. And she said that, hey, look, I'm thinking of starting a partnership with 2 other people. One's based in Japan, one's based in Toronto. I'm based here. And each has its own partnership. And then we're thinking of combining for this partnership. And so I have a number of questions for you. What type of business format would be most appropriate? What type of terms do we need in the agreement? We'll have to join probably another person into the partnership. And do we give ownership there? And we'll need a joint bank account. Where should the bank account be based? And what should the signatory power be? And it's this whole list. I'm not going to read the whole thing.
I was so with you on the first one. I'm like, oh yeah, quick, there's a drive-by question of, I'm going to make it up do I have to worry about them being in different, an overarching kind of you might say no, it doesn't matter that people are in different countries. I know it does, but just to say a sort of yes, no, do I even need to worry about, I've asked you those kinds of questions.
No,
is this a big block? And you're like, just don't worry about it. I'm like, okay, go on. I'm
Is
done.
it possible? Do we have to all be in the same country? And I certainly had.
Can you even have a business with people in different, yes, no. So I was there. It feels like all the things we were just talking about. And then there's do you give the other person equity? I'm like, oh, that has quick. And then there's this, you're like, wait, oh my God. Okay, that's a project.
It just kept going and we're getting really deeper. And the email just kept, you know how you get an email at first and if you just see it, it's on the screen and it's like, hey, I just need to talk to you about this. You're like, cool, whatever. But if you have to keep scrolling. I think the scrolling is really where it got me.
If your question needs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh my God, I love this topic. Because it's such a fine line, because I know you well enough to know that you are absolutely not a person who's for me to answer your question, you have to hire me. Right. Here's my agreement.
Ding.
Yeah,
exactly.
Ding, 15 minutes. That's the entire reason you created the
empty hourglass.
The empty hourglasses, so that you could just be free with your time. And I'm constantly looking for ways to be free with my time. However. is what you do for a living. And there's a level, I mean, for you even more so because there's a liability to legal advice. So you really do have to be like under agreement. I mean, I think you do. I know my husband's an architect.
No, my malpractice carrier emphasizes this continuously.
Thou shalt not give out free involved legal device. Right? Advice. Yeah, no legal devices either.
Legal devices.
Oh my gosh, I love this question because it is a really tricky thing. I have been like super fortunate in that for the most part, people have just naturally been pretty respective of that line. And in fact, if anything, they're like, oh, I don't want to bother you. Can I?
Well, but here's the thing though, with you, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but because of what you do, almost like a psychologist or a psychiatrist, it's hard to ask, I think, a quick question.
A drive-by question.
Right, a drive-by question.
Right.
Because you, in a lot of what you do, the facilitations and the one-on-one, I mean, you dig really deep. And maybe there's something with that. I don't know, because people can always ask me, hey, should I be worried about this kind of now?
The closest thing, until very recently, the closest thing I've had happen is just that, because I do share I'll go out to lunch with anybody and talk a thing through. That is how I built my business. And I continue to really, really, really enjoy that.
It's the best part of my business too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, if somehow someone else was paying me, I would do that all that. I wish I didn't have to sort of think through like, okay, this is a project and this is how much it costs. Yes. I would love to just be able to freely go do what I do and not think about that. Life doesn't work that way. I do sometimes run into a slight problem where, if it's truly a friend, and this is like, how do you make these classifications? I'll talk to anybody all the time forever. Yeah. There's sometimes some people in kind of a gray area, like we're definitely acquaintances solidly who will more than just like once a year want to go out and just talk a thing through. And I always kind of keep this feeling of like, am I starting to feel a tiny bit resentful about it? Because if I am, if I feel like they are taking and it's something that should be charged for, like that's on me to set that boundary.
How do you say, the level of our friendship is 3 bullet points.
No, exactly.
It's not 5, and you've gone to 5, and I was okay until I hit number 4.
Right. Like, or I've decided you rise to the standard of 2 up to 20-minute phone calls a year. Right. This is your 3rd. You now have to pay me. It's a very delicate thing, and I can share how I do it. But the funny thing is, I recently had someone reach out to me who, if you look through the emails, like, very much seemed like like wanting to hire me. So I actually thought it was I'd like to schedule some time with you. It didn't say like, can we get together and have a gab? It was.
Do people say that a lot? Have a gab?
No, I don't know that anyone ever says have a gab.
Do you get a lot of appointments in 1940s London?
Listen, broad. So, it was very much, I'd like to schedule some time with you. I have some things I need to work on. I mean, this language people use to book me. Right. And then we got together and we talked through a thing and we talked through her thing. And then I ended up having an issue in her industry. She's a programmer.
Wait, let me just ask you one question first. When you got together, I don't know why this is important to me, but it is. Did you get together like for coffee or was she in your office?
In my office.
Oh, okay.
It came to my office.
Because I think that matters, actually.
I think it's a relevant point. Yeah. But, and shame on me for not getting ahead of this and addressing it ahead of time and saying like, here's my fee, how it works, whatever. But I kind of wanted to hear what she was up to. Yeah. So she's a programmer and I wanted to kind of scope out a thing that I was thinking about having developed. And she was like, hey, I can knock that out for you like crazy fast. And so in this point, I'm thinking we're probably doing like a barter thing or something. Sure. And we went a little over in time and I had to run. We didn't have time to kind of tie up the end of the thing. And she goes, well, let me work on this and I'll get back to you, whatever. So then she writes me back and says, I was able to just like whip this up really quickly. And you've been such a help to me over the years. I'm not even going to charge you for it.
Oh, okay.
And so it was this really funny thing of like, oh, that's funny because we just spent like an hour and a half doing what I do for a living.
But now she's done you a favor.
And you are graciously doing me a favor. I'm like, remember that part where we used my expertise? Like I was fine just making the whole thing a big wash. Yeah. Like you helped me, I helped you. That's what life's about. It's so easy. Like I was super happy with that. And then all of a sudden I was like, wow, this math formula turned out very interesting.
But if you raise that, if you were to whatever that communication looks like, saying, yeah, that's what I figured. That's why I didn't charge you for my time. Then it sounds petty.
It felt petty. And honestly, it goes back to, I was like, shame on me. That's on me for not being a little bit more clear, a little bit more making sure that, it was, and it didn't matter. And I decided it wasn't worth the effort. If it was a bigger picture thing, I would have had to have dealt with it. But I want to go back to your original story, because how did you handle it?
I see. That's the thing. It came in. It came in yesterday.
I've not yet handled it.
I have not yet handled it because it came in yesterday, and I like to be very responsive to the emails, except when I really need to think about that, because here's what I know I don't want to do. Say, hey, thanks for reaching out. That should only be a couple hours time, so I can keep this under X number of dollars.
Well.
And which is partially, that might be a legitimate response, but I wasn't comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't want to say, well, I can go through this, but you have to hire me. I don't want to be off-putting.
Right.
Because I do like her. And like you say, I am free with my time, and I don't want to be one of those people that's always just, watching the clock. Well, it's 6 minutes.
You couldn't be one of the, you answer quick off the cuff questions all the time.
Yeah.
Regularly.
And normally you rely on the other person to self-screen. Like if any of our listeners, I'm sure this is a common experience, a doctor and you're friends with the doctor or even casual acquaintances, and you don't want to always go to that doctor. Hey, it really hurts right here. Can you take a look at this? Or I'm feeling, it's hard to breathe. I have this cough. What do you think it is? And you don't want to be that person.
Right. Well, but I think you said a really interesting sentence. You rely on the other person to self-screen.
Yeah.
And I think that is, that's why earlier I said I've been pretty lucky that people do self-screen with me pretty well. But I know lots of people who have pretty deep issues with this where people don't self-screen. And so I think that's the really key part, because what we're talking about here is boundaries and how to set boundaries. I think for you, it's interesting. You imagine it easy for me. I imagine it easier for you because you do have, I imagine a great answer is like, hey, I'm always, that I'm always happy to help out wherever I can. This dabbles close to where my liability insurance makes some pretty clear parameters. Like I'm not allowed to answer this involved questions or else I violate my rule. I feel like you've got kind of a heavy, we talked about the enforcer last week. It's almost a little bit like you have that enforcer to be like, oh gosh, I'd love to, but I have to be really careful about how far I go on this. My husband cannot sign, my husband could sketch up a napkin thing for somebody. He cannot do drawings that are going to be used for any kind of permitting thing or that will. He's like, I'm not covered, and I actually could invalidate my other liability insurance if I mess this up.
And it's funny because I do
this up, but do this without coverage.
Yeah, I do believe in having the heavy, and it's funny that you say that because I tell my clients that all the time. I'll tell them, when they say, "Geez, I just want to be a nice guy about this. I don't think we need to really have anything in writing." I said, "No, here's what you do. What you do is you just say, my lawyer will kill me." If it were up to me, I would just do this, whatever. But my lawyer I just don't want to hear from him. We got to get something written up.
Right.
Or even if you say something in a different context, but you say, it's our company policy to do this. Sometimes you can, especially if you're not the owner, if it's not your name on the door, maybe you're a partner, maybe you're a manager, but you say, well, it's just our company policy. Whenever you can deflect the responsibility to another heavy, whether it's the lawyer, the policy, the insurance carrier, or something like that, it's helpful.
It is. I don't want to step over the super important process of it. It kind of a little bit comes back to that no is a complete sentence, although in these contexts, you wouldn't just say, no, I'm not answering your question. So I don't mean it that abruptly, but I've been having so many conversations lately that all come back to this discomfort of being able to say no to a thing or draw a boundary or just say yes, I can do these parts, but here's where I have to draw the line when you don't have a really good reason. A lot of well-adjusted people can say no if they have a heavy to rely on, even if it's a bit of a stretch to wrap in that heavy. Really struggle with drawing a boundary when it's just a personal preference or because that doesn't feel right. And I lean so heavily on this agreement in relationships that it's an interesting kind of back and forth. I had a client text me the other day about getting on a phone call, and she was very blunt. She was very, it was evening. She goes, well, at your earliest convenience. And I said, would you need to talk tonight or is tomorrow okay? And she said, well, it's up to you. It's, it's blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't doing much of anything in the evening. I was like, well, let's hop on and actually my next day was really busy. I said, well, let's hop on the call tonight and just so I can get a sense of what's going on. And so we got on the call, and at the end of it, she was like, thank you so much. This was just really weighing on me, and I have to go into this meeting tomorrow. And I said, hey, I'm glad we were able to talk, but in the future, just like if you need to talk, say, can you get on a call tonight? And this is the really important part. She said, and I've said these things to her before, but I think it needed to come up in an actual example for it to really land and for her to understand that I meant it. I said, look, if you need to talk, just say, I need to talk. And she said, yeah, well, I know you have kids and I don't want to be a bother and you're busy and, it's your evening. I said, I get that. Thank you. I said, but here's my request. I want you to be able to ask for whatever it is that you need, and you can trust that I will take care of my own boundaries. Like you can trust that if it's a bad evening for me, if I'm in the middle of something, if I don't feel good, if I just don't want to, that I will say, I can't do that. And then I can trust that you will ask, and it will save us all a bunch of this time of like, hey, like when somebody says, hey, what are you doing Friday? And you're like, why? And they're trying, it's a good place. They're trying to like dance around. It's like, I don't want to bother you. And it would just, I long for this like worldwide agreement of like, ask me for what you need. I promise you I will take care of me. And I need to trust and know that you will take care of you, right? Like I can say like, hey, can you help me out with this, Elliot? I trust that you will say, nope, can't today.
Right, but here's the thing. You, in that example, you had that conversation after having already established the relationship.
Well, what's funny is I tell that to people right off the bat, but until you have the relationship, I don't think you've like earned that trust.
And that's what I was going to get to, because I think it's so vital, at least to start, because you plowed the ground anyway by having that conversation at the beginning, and so
not even a euphemism.
You can call back to that when it comes up. Say, hey, remember when I said that? Oh, yeah, that's what you meant.
Yeah.
But I think it's so important, and I know that I don't do this often enough. And I should, because even simple things like at the bottom of my email, I not only have my office number, I have my cell number. And of course, people can text and people can call, and I have my cell with me on the weekends. And what I need to do is have the conversation with the people I want to have the conversation with, saying at the beginning of the relationship, hey, look, I'm not just 9 to 5. If you need me, if you have something that's bothering you, if it's just going to ruin your weekend, whatever, we need to talk. You can't worry about me. You have to reach out. And my promise to you is I will tell you honestly if I can't do it, if I'm with my kids or wherever.
Those two things are so linked. Like in order for them, it's sort of the friend agreement that I make very explicit with any like mom friends I have. It's like, because they say, oh, call anytime. I'm happy to take the kids. I said, I will feel confident calling you if I know that you will say no. And I don't feel entirely confident until the first time they say, oh, hey, that doesn't work for us. Sorry, I can't do it. Once I get that first no, and this is a really important thing. Once I get that first no, I'm like, oh, like giant exhale. Okay, I can trust that this person won't say yes and then hang up the phone and be like, oh, I got to like rearrange my whole life because Jody called. So here's the interesting thing. Coming back to your original story, there is so much power in finding ways, because once you, like every time you set a healthy boundary, you plant the seed, and doing it in a kind and as, clear way as you can, you plant the seeds at the very least in that relationship for it to be okay to take care of your own needs, which is so important because otherwise those things become toxic later all the time. And you also show that person that it's okay to do that in the world. I learned the ability to be better about those things by knowing somebody who just would and the first time they did it, I was like, oh my gosh, like it was almost a tiny bit affronted, but I was like, oh, that's actually a really fair thing. And so I started to build that muscle of it's okay to say, this doesn't work for me.
But I will tell you that I have this conversation with Nikki all the time, because Nikki, as I've said before, she's just the nicest, most compassionate person.
That is true.
Very patient, as you can tell, because we've been married for so long. But so she'll get invited to things and she'll think, I don't want to do that. I just don't want to do that. It's just no. And then I'll say, well, take a pass. Tell them that, thank them and tell them to take a pass. I can't do that. Now, I will tell you that in our history and relatively recently, she was invited to something and she knew right off the bat she didn't want to go. And she had to say, I said, did you finally tell them that you couldn't do it? She said, yeah, I told them that you and I had to go out to dinner with one of your clients later. It was on that night. And I was like, really? She goes, yeah, I told her. And Nikki does not. She hates anything that even shades the truth. And she goes, yeah, I had to tell
white
him.
lies. Like she does not white lie.
She does not, no. So she said, yeah, I told him that we had to go to a client dinner.
So now we have to do that, so I'm not lying.
So we went out to dinner. And it wasn't necessarily a client dinner, but
it was close enough.
But it was close enough because this person was in the neighborhood. And she's like, but if they see the cars, I have to go out. And,
the thing is, I'm not a big proponent of white lying, but I am if it's just like as a what's the word? Like a gateway drug to seeing that when you set the healthy boundary that the world doesn't come off its axis.
Right. The friendships don't end. The relationships don't people don't cut you off.
Well, that's the fascinating thing. So if it helps you just sort of get a taste of saying no and then you figure it, and then the next time you can just be like, oh, you can just simply say that doesn't work for me. You don't even have to say we have plans. Just say like, oh, sorry, we can't be there that night.
Yeah.
That's true. Like last night, we played a gig, and one of the members of my band was just, when he walked in, I actually thought he was like really sick or something because he looked so run down. He was just exhausted. And I wasn't sure he was going to make it through the thing. I kept looking at him like, do you need to go home? Because it was like 8 till midnight. And so at the end of it, I was like, please get out of here, go home. I was like, can you rest this weekend? Because he just looks like if he keeps up this way, he's going to get sick. And he's like, no, I've got this volunteer thing I said I'd do and, blah, blah, blah. And like, clearly he's not, whatever. And I said, you could say no. He's like, yeah, but I told him, I said, look, here's the deal. If you woke up in the morning and you were vomiting profusely, you wouldn't go, right? He goes, well, of course not. I was like, okay, so there is a world where you don't show up and like life the world keeps spinning, yes. They figure it out. I said, so I'm not saying that you have to not go, but just don't make it this like binary, it's either go or like the world stops spinning, that you can kind of sort it out. And to take it back to your original example, I don't think that has to be binary either. I think wrapping her into was one of my favorite techniques is if there's a way that I can wrap the person into what I see. It's not just that you're saying like, oh, I don't want to help you. Because you do. You want to help her. It's just that she's asking for more than what feels like an initial step. And the thing is, she may not know like that is more involved. She might think these are easy questions and not realize that those are really nuanced, involved, multi-layer.
No, and that's very true. I mean, there is an irony there that her specialty is consulting with international corporations.
Oh, wait, what?
Yeah, on different cultures.
Never mind.
On different cultures and what's acceptable and what's not, and picking up the cues and all that stuff. So
is she testing you? Is she trying to make a case study?
But she doesn't. But either way, you're right. I want to make sure I don't damage the relationship. I don't want to make her feel bad. The essence of, I think, manners is to try not to make the other person feel awkward. But at the same time, I do want to, I mean, look at the other possibility. Let's say I really went and I put all of my analysis on all of these issues, and it would take me hours to do, to really put something together for her and send it over. Now, a couple things would happen. Number one, I'd resent it.
Yes.
I'm not going to send her a bill in the mail that she wasn't expecting. That would never happen.
Nope.
So I'd resent it. But if she saw the work product, I have no doubt that she would probably look at it and go, oh, I didn't, she wouldn't have realized what was involved in answering all of these questions. And maybe she does think this is a quick, nope, yes, no, 2, 8, 5, no.
Right.
And that's it. So I have to be sensitive to the relationship as well. But you're right. I do have to, this is the time, this is the opportunity right here to set the boundaries and remind her, A, that there are boundaries, B, that it's okay for her to set them, and C, that these are mine.
Yeah, because you said two really important things. You said, I don't want to damage the relationship. And you said, I don't want to make her feel bad. And that is what everyone always says when they don't want to draw a boundary. And it makes perfect sense. It comes from such a good place, but it steps over the part. Like, if you really want, and this is the thing that I feel like gets missed in this entire conversation, is if you really are making a stand to not damage the relationship, you also cannot hurt your feelings or take it on your, like, the other person is not the only person in the relationship. And when you make these choices based solely on the impact of the other person, I won't say you are damaging the relationship, but you are absolutely putting the relationship in the line of fire where it can be damaged because you're taking it on the chin.
You're not honoring the relationship.
You're not honoring the relationship. You're just avoiding a thing that then actually has the potential to really hurt the relationship.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts.
Your stories.
Your stories.
You can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best
Lovingly
of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Which is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.